It took us a while to realize that because we didn't really go after him because of his size. And then in the spring, we're like, hey, this is the guy with the skill. This is the guy with the competitive spirit. This is the guy with the substance right here. He just is not as fast as the other guys, is not as big as the other guys, but he's the one that really has that winning mechanism.
It's the month of March, and on the Be Worth Following podcast, that means leadership lessons from the world of college basketball. You just heard from my former teammate and current men's basketball head coach at Purdue University, Matt Painter. For 2 decades, Paint, as I know him, has solidified Purdue's standing as one of the nation's leading programs in Division I basketball. His accomplishments over the last 20 years are numerous. During that time, he's led Purdue to over 440 wins, 5 Big Ten regular season championships, and a trip to the 2024 Final Four and National Championship game. Just this past weekend, as we record this in late March of 2025, Purdue won its way into the NCAA tournament's Sweet 16 for the 6th time in 8 seasons, and its 8th time with Matt as its head coach. His ability to simultaneously develop talent, sustain excellence, and build a strong culture has made him one of the most trusted leaders in all of college basketball. In this episode, you'll hear the transparent honesty Matt Painter's become known for. You'll hear his perspective on what it takes to be a truth teller with his players. Players who, because of their immense talent, may not be used to hearing the hard truths they need to hear in order to develop. You'll also hear something I want you to pay special attention to, and that is Matt's vulnerability. It's easy to look at someone with his resume and believe that he's always perfectly trusted his instincts and that confidence has never been a question. In this episode, you'll hear that that is not true. But first, we begin by hearing about the leaders who have most influenced Matt Painter to become the leader he is today.
I think, a lot of times people that shape you, you don't realize who's really shaped you until you get into the working environment, right? A lot of the things that I look back and say, why did I do this in coaching? Because that's all I knew. So for me, my dad coached me when I was little. So he coached me from kindergarten to 5th or 6th grade. But my dad, being the fool that he was, his passion for basketball became my passion, even though he's an attorney and he didn't coach. That's really what it was. He coached little kids basketball. My brother was 2 years older than me. He coached little kids basketball before my brother and I were ready to play.
Oh, wow.
Because he wanted to be prepared when we did play. I would start with my parents more than anything. Being able to grow up and to have people that you looked up to and you had people that cared about you and provided for you, and to be able to share a lot of things with them as I've got into coaching. Just being able to share the experiences of playing at Purdue and coaching at Purdue and doing those things. I think that in a roundabout way, very indirect, it's like a reward, right? Obviously, from a leadership standpoint and being in coaching, my high school coach, Stan Doherty, my college coach, Gene Cady, and then the coaches that I worked for, like Tom Ryder, a guy by the name of Dave Davis in North Carolina at a Division II school, Rick Samuels for 3 years at Eastern Illinois, then Bruce Weber for 5 years at Southern Illinois before I took over as the head coach there when he went to Illinois. Just a lot of really good people that did things the right way. And when you start to see some different things in college basketball and guys that, maybe don't do the right things or handle themselves in a professional manner or just flat out cheat, right? You look back and say well, what would I do if I was with people and that's what they did when I started my profession? You don't know that. I don't think I would do something of that nature, but you don't know that. Nobody knows that. And so I was very fortunate to be around, especially Rick Samuels for 3 years and Bruce Weber for 5 years in Division I, where they carried themselves in a professional manner. They were by the books. They did things the right way. People were important. Education was important. So it allowed me to stack my priorities right. It's competitive. Guys are trying to keep their job. Guys are trying to fight to make a name as an assistant through the recruiting world. And, everybody wants to move up. So I feel very fortunate that I was around those people. Because at the end of the day, when they lay you down, I hope your win-loss record isn't something they talk about. I hope they talk about like, hey, this guy treated somebody right. This guy did things the right way. He set the right example. He, was on me, but he cared about me. He was genuine. He treated someone like a human being. So I think I've been around a lot of people that are like that, and I've tried to do that.
Well, it's a great point you make in terms of how we're shaped by the people and the environments that we're around. And even just that little pause that you give is, I mean, it pauses me to think, yeah, I think I wouldn't do this or that that's not above board, but, who was I exposed to? It draws you back to be really thankful to have been around people who guided you and exampled you into that direction.
What it really gets to is that, like, I think I lived a long time in my youth and getting through college and even in starting my coaching career where I don't know how much purpose I had. And I think that's just a byproduct of youth. That's just like, hey, let's have fun. I'm very transparent with our players, especially when somebody gets into trouble, where I'm like, hey, man, believe me, I was very social. I said, there is no judgment here, but I also want to help you because as this trickles, like you think you got this under control and you don't. Nobody has it under control. That's been proven. So you have to really understand if you have a vice and you get into that social world, it can take control of it and ruin your life. And it can ruin where you want to go. It can end your life and it can end the lives around you. So like that's important. And those are important talks for like young people, but you got to have a purpose and you don't always have to have the answer to that, but you have to be working towards the answer of that. I think we're quick to give the answer because, man, that sounds good and that might get somebody away from me or get somebody off my back, right? When you're young. But it's like, hey, you know what? It's okay to say, I don't know. Like, I really don't know what I want to do, but you got to know how you're going to go about it. And you got to know how to treat people. And that's who you are, right? That's who you are. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes in that area, but your intent has to be good. Your intent can't be poor and you think you're going to get a good result and you're going to grow as a person. As long as your intent is good, you make a mistake and you're like, man, I didn't plan for this to happen. Yeah, but it still did happen. Let's go through this and chew on this and figure this out. You can make this correction and be a better person because of it. And that's no different than the game, right? The life is no different than the game. Like if you own it, you fix it. If you don't own it, you don't fix it. And you can't let that, especially when you're leading and you're in charge, man. You got to be able to own things and admit when you're wrong. And now it'll be much easier for the people under you to be able to see it when it happens to them.
I want to come back to the own it thing because I've heard you say things along those lines previously. But before we get there, I want to go back a little bit to something you were just talking about because you talk about kind of as your own purpose evolved over time. And people will look at where you're sitting now, what you've been accomplishing at the highest levels, and see even 20 years at Purdue, a little bit at SIU as a head coach before that. But there was 10 years where you were an assistant. There were 10 years where you were, as you mentioned, all these head coaches, you had a chance to work through Washington and Jefferson and Barton and Eastern Illinois. What was the progression? If you look back on it now with a little 2020 hindsight, as you think about purpose, what did that, decade of being an assistant, how did that evolve you as a person and as a leader?
Yeah, basketball wise, I always enjoyed the camaraderie and enjoyed trying to figure things out within your league. You learn a lot from those coaches in conference because they know you better. They study you more, they see you the next year, but it's hard when you move quick because you go from Division III 1 year, Division II 1 year. But I thought it was cool as time went on, the people that I met, the people I stayed in contact with, and also the coaches that you learned against. And then the 2 years I was in the OVC, then the 6 years I was in the Missouri Valley, and now obviously 20 years of going back, to the Big Ten. Like that's what you really learn more than anything is just through the mistakes that happen. Because you can learn from like success, but a lot of times it's hard. That's hard. You learn through your failures. So like that was something for me of just like, what do I want to do? And then personally, like, what do I want to do? Like, but yeah, I think those are the types of things where it's just like, I've always tried to help. Like, that's one of my main things is that like, I want to get along. I want to get people that are on the same page, but just deep down, I want to be able to help an individual player. One of my shortcomings as a coach is that I don't like it when it doesn't work for a guy that I recruited and I'm coaching. And now they got to go into a role that they have to go into because that's what we need from our team, but they don't want to. Like that's hard for me because I want it for them, but it's not an individual sport. Like what's best for Purdue supersedes what's best for them. But it still bothers me. I had to look at myself first. You're trying to figure them out. Well, allow them to figure you out. Like you got to be just as vulnerable as them if you want growth, because ultimately we're both part of this. So let's be able to grow together. But here's who you play for. Like this is who I am. This is how I'm wired. This is what's important to me. Here's what's not important to me. And vice versa. That piece of it's really helped me kind of grow. But just, being comfortable who you are. Like I think I'm a lot more comfortable with who I am. There's nothing wrong with copying people when it comes to basketball, but you can't copy people. You run good offense, I'm going to steal it from you. But like you got to be yourself. And it's okay being yourself. Because I think deep down, most people, and I fall in this category, you just don't like how you sound. You don't like how you look. You just you wanted to be something different. And you don't even like that you feel that way, right? But then again, once you're in tune with yourself, you realize that, hey man, I'm pretty grateful for what I have. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for I got to coach at Purdue for 20 years. That blows my mind. I worked at it. We had success, but a lot of people work at it and have success. To be able to have the timing right for this to work for me and still be here 20 years later, that's very surreal to me. So I never take that for granted. Never.
I think, Paint, and I'm thinking back to when we were teammates, your X and O capabilities were evident. I mean, I knew what you were going to do for a living after about 6 months of being around you. I'm like, oh, this is pretty clear. This guy's going to be a coach. But my suspicion is that the things that have created your longevity, it's the things that you're talking about right now, I'm guessing, that has fueled the majority of that longevity. That idea is I'm going to get comfortable with myself. I'm going to be vulnerable with my guys. I'm going to invite them to be vulnerable. But we're going to go to the human level of this. I think there's a lot of people that try to win the game from an X and O standpoint, and this is the work that they don't do. And they don't have sustained success over a long period of time because they haven't done that inner work. Once I can be comfortable in my own skin, the decisions that we're making are not about protecting me, my ego, my job, whatever. I'm more settled to make better decisions, and I am more settled to be focused on other people instead of myself.
The one thing that I always get to is I know I can fix me because I'm honest with myself. Now, if I can fix me and fix the mistakes that I made here, now I can push on and I'm going to help fixing us or an individual player in a certain area. But your build up to that is so important in what you do every day. Like if they just know, I really, really care about people, but sometimes I struggle to show that. And it's not intentional. And it's something that I had to get in tune with. And that was kind of part of what you're talking about. I love the connection between your basketball growth and your growth as a person and your growth as a leader, because they're normally pretty intertwined. There's always great examples to be able to kind of look at and say that. But that's something I work really hard at, is just making sure that they understand that when things go bad or things aren't, where we need them, that part of those mistakes, I have to own that. And that's so important.
Well, let's talk about owning it a little bit. You've mentioned it a couple times, and I want to go back about a decade when things were not quite as rosy as they have been at Purdue. And you go on the record in a way that most head coaches, especially at the Division I level, don't. You talked about, look, we have to teach our guys how to play hard. And if we can't teach them how to play hard, then we have to go find other guys who will play hard. Either way, it's on us. It's on us as coaches. It's on me. It's not on the players. It's on me to either teach or find. And, I go back to that. You're in not the solid position necessarily that you are now, but you're doing something that very few leaders, especially in the public eye, are willing to do. How did you get to the spot where you were willing to just so blatantly own things like that and say, hey, you know what? This is the reality. I'm going to own it. Let's go. I'm not going to shy away from it.
I didn't think I did a bad job recruiting. I thought I did a bad job evaluating. And I had to break down our evaluation better. I had to take people that I liked over people that were ranked. And so I had to philosophically get to a point to where we needed a more skilled player, but we also still needed someone where education's important and you have that balance. I think that just kind of set the tone for me. So I'll tell you a great story. So have some friends over, and a guy was kind of a friend of a friend, but I knew who he was. He was a walk-on football player at Purdue. He roomed with Brian Cardinal, and we're just playing cards. And I'm kind of, I guess, playing and kind of just like frustrated. I'm kind of just talking. I don't think I'm kind of talking like too deep into it, like with a bunch of guys that watch basketball, but they're all non-basketball guys. And he just calls me the next day and says, hey, here's what I do for a living. He goes, I do a personality testing through DISC, and I was a football assistant for 10 years. I just thought it was all guesswork. I've done a lot of companies, a lot of Fortune 500 companies. I want to grow this. I would love to use you kind of as a guinea pig. And it was really good for me because it just a lot of soul searching, a lot of educating myself on the personality test. But that's what it allowed me to do. It allowed me to dig into myself also. And at that time, that was, it was right after I made that comment. It was after the season. I just was like, I think we have to get somewhere schematically and get more skilled guys, first of all, from a basketball standpoint. But they have to have education in there. Try to find people like, they want to get an education, they want to get their degree, that have skill. Now you start to throw the competitive spirit in there. Like, do you really love the game of basketball? So when I call guys, like where they're at, like consistently, like what they're doing, like he's just getting back from the gym. He just got back from a workout. He just got back from summer league. He's out back shooting. So like now, like we're trying to go and find those guys. Well, this isn't drafting. You don't draft, you recruit. So sometimes you do find them and you can't get them. So you got to like dig deep into your own feelings. Like, who can we sign? Who can we get? So we have 3 or 4 guys on our team right now that didn't have a high major offer. They fit us. They're great. They're really, really good for us. But sometimes you got to be able to look at some things and say, this kid's going to be good, but I don't need him right away. That's hard to sell somebody that. So like all these things that came into play through this, there was a lot of indirect valuables that through personality testing and through soul searching and through sitting there and like kind of treating it as an exercise, it kind of became who I am and how I go about things and who we are, because now there's a plan to what we're doing. So you really get the test of people. But if you dug deep there, and PJ Thompson's a winner, but he was a winner before he came on our campus. And we realized that. It took us a while to realize that because we didn't really go after him because of his size. And then in the spring, we're like, hey, this is the guy with the skill. This is the guy with the competitive spirit. This is the guy with the substance right here. He just is not as fast as the other guys, is not as big as the other guys, but he's the one that really has that winning mechanism. So getting into that and figuring out like what can work for you and how you blend your team through your honesty. If you go to a school and they say, here's how we're going to use you, and in competition, you can't get to where you need to be, and you're the 7th or 8th man, but yet they said this, in your mind, you're like, you lied to me. Well, I would rather lose you than get you when I didn't shoot you straight. But if I do get you, now we're on the same page.
How do you get to this spot though, Payne? I mean, this is the thing. You're talking about being a truth teller, and you have excelled at this in the media all over the place. But you're talking about interacting with young men who have enormous potential, and you're talking about, I'm going to tell them the truth instead of just what they want to hear, knowing that in some cases you're creating a flight risk or an opportunity somebody's not going to be here. How did you develop in your own leadership to say, you know what, this is how I'm going to do it, I believe in this because there are so many, and I don't think this is relegated to college athletics. There's so many in leadership who don't necessarily, they're too scared to say the truth because they're afraid they're going to lose their top talent if they really lay it on the line. How did you get to the spot where you're comfortable doing that?
So we have a good staff. We have good coaches. We have a good system. We've had growth. We've had success. We've had academic success. We are the best in our league in retention. So if you take all that in, we're just process based. We work hard at treating people the right way. We work hard at telling them the truth, but also being diplomatic about it. You don't have to always crush somebody. You can be diplomatic. You can get your point across without, making things personal or making things harsh or trying to take something to court. But get out in front of your problems. I'm the one that's been in college for 36 years. They haven't. Like, get out in front of your issues for them and start talking about, here are some things that are coming your way. Here are some obstacles that are coming your way. Like, here's how I'm looking. I had to meet with one of our players the other day, and I just told him everything from my perspective. And I probably overshared, but he deserved to know why. And I started it with the shape of our team. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren. I think we have some really, really talented young guys. We have 5 freshmen. When they're going to be good, I don't know. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe in 2 years. But I feel all 5 of them will be really good players at Purdue. I believe in that. And so we're going to work towards that. But we're going to be honest along the way. But we also have to be honest about how they shape into our team. But they have to earn their way. They have to compete. They have to learn a system. They have to, there has to be some change there adapting to college. It's a hard piece. Well, we're the ones that go through it every year. Like, get out in front of their issues so they're not issues. So that for us has been really good. But really, back to your question, is just being process based. Sit there and be honest with people and just keep telling them, here's how we are, here's how we see you, here's what we're about. I'm going to do this for you because I want to see you be successful, and pass it on. We always want something. I think it's just a natural human behavior. We always want something back. I think that's not a bad feeling. It's a natural, I think, human behavior. But just do something for somebody else and help somebody else, whether it's your job, it's not your job, because you want to see them be successful. I've always been that way. Learn to root for people, want what's best for other people. We build up such a callous front as competitors. You don't have to be competitive 24/7. You just don't. If you can get that piece and that can grow with you, man, that's going to help out more people than, setting a good back screen for a lob.
As we wrap up our time with Matt Painter, I just want to backtrack for a moment and just say a little bit about my gratitude for having had the opportunity to play basketball at Purdue for amazing coaches alongside amazing teammates, of which Matt was one. Occasionally as I visit with folks and the topic of Purdue basketball comes up, and if they find out that I spent a couple of years playing there, they tend to look at me differently. And the funny part is I don't have any influence. I barely had influence on the program when I was there. I certainly don't have any now. But they have gone on to do such great things, not only winning on the court, but how they conduct themselves off the court. I'm just so proud to be connected to what Gene Cady and Matt Painter and all the people involved in that program have built over the years. I'm just so very blessed and fortunate to have participated in the very small way that I did. And it shaped me. It influences me. I was so moved when Purdue broke through, made it to the Final Four last year for the first time in 44 years. It was an emotional, not only day when it happened, but for me, the whole week that followed was very emotional. And so it means a lot to me, but really my biggest emotion is gratitude. Gratitude for having to get to be a part and to do the very best I could to contribute to something that is so very special to that day. Having said that, it was such a joy for me to visit with Matt Painter, to get to talk with him about behind the scenes of what has been progressing for him throughout his career. And to me, there are a couple of things that stand out so very much. Did you notice how he talked about growing and developing in who he was and is as a person? This is just an amazing thing to pay attention to, because I got to tell you, when it comes to basketball, when it comes to the X's and O's of basketball, Matt Painter is brilliant. I've been around him and I know the game. And Matt Painter has forgotten more basketball than I've ever known. He is an amazing student of the game. He loves it. He knows it. He is absolutely dedicated to the craft of knowing and understanding the game, the X's and the O's. And yet, even with that level of capability that he has and has honed over the years, as we went through that conversation, did you hear how much his personal development as a human being is playing into the success that he has had as a leader? The idea of getting clearer and clearer about what his purpose is, becoming more and more comfortable in his own skin and the role that that plays and how it influences leadership. And then, as he turns from doing the work on himself to using that more well-developed human being to now be somebody who cares for and about others. And you heard him talk about getting satisfaction, about seeing others succeed. You heard him talk about how it's hard for him when the story of how he thinks a career of a player might unfold, when that doesn't end up happening. That care that goes into it. It's really interesting to me, as Matt described his progression as a leader, that it matches up exactly with the research that we've gotten to be a part of here at the Apereo. The idea that 77% of your effectiveness as a leader comes from who you are, not what you do. Even in people as talented and as gifted as Matt Painter, who could X and O just about anybody right under the table. They would bury you with knowledge of how the X and O's work. And yet, it is the inner quality of who Matt and that staff seeks to be that is carrying a huge chunk of the water towards the greatness that the Purdue basketball program has experienced. I just think it's an extraordinary story, and it helps us to know that if you're talking with somebody that's really brilliant at their craft, it's really helpful to know that and to see that it was the who side of them, not their knowledge or their skill, but it's who they are that is carrying so much of their success. And it led to, as you heard Matt unpack, if I'm caring for somebody, he's a truth teller. He has hard conversations with people. He tells them what they need to hear because he cares enough too. Now you could say, well, he's just trying to win. Yeah, but how many leaders sugarcoat what needs to be said to the point where the message is never even received? And yet what I feel with Matt, as you listen to some of his inner development that he's done over the years, it's that groundedness within himself that allows him to then say, we're going to say the hard thing. We're going to have the hard conversation, because you've got to know I'm not doing you any favors as a player and as a person if I spare you the truth that is going on here. But you also heard him say, you can do it with some tact. You don't have to destroy somebody in order to deliver the truth. So you hear that there is a care and concern there as well. It takes me back to a scripture. Perhaps some of you have heard it before. Speak the truth in love. And I hear that Matt is leading that way, but there's this basis that he is doing that from, that greater clarity and settledness about who he is that enables him to speak the truth in love. So that leads me to the question that I want to leave you with today. And that is this. Do you feel grounded enough in who you are to consistently speak the truth in love? This is Tim Spiker, reminding you to be worth following and to follow us wherever you receive your podcasts. If you've heard something valuable today, please share our podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. And if you're up for it, leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.